You've decided you're ready to become a parent, and suddenly you're overwhelmed with people who feel they have the right to inform you on the correct way to conceive, give birth, what fears you should have, and the proper way to parent. How do you filter through the opinions? How do you know what's trustworthy information and what's a myth or just plain outdated? Welcome to the Birth Ease podcast. Join your host Michelle Smith and her guests as they cut through the noise and fear by sharing valuable tips, tools, and proven methods that help you connect with your own inner wisdom as you navigate the sacred journey that is pregnancy, birth, and parenthood in a more relaxed and confident manner. This podcast does not constitute, nor is it intended, as medical advice.
Hello, Birth Ease families. Welcome to this heartfelt space. I'm your host, Michelle Smith, and I'm so grateful you are here. The month of October is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, and just as last year, I've chosen to dedicate the October episodes of the podcast to baby loss. I know it's a really difficult topic, yet 1 in 4 women have experienced some sort of pregnancy or infant loss. If you have not experienced it personally, chances are high that you know someone who has. And the grief of losing a child is often surrounded in silence. It's my intention to create a safe, welcoming, and informative space for not only bereaved families, and also for those who love and support them. And these episodes also will benefit my fellow birth professionals, giving them insights to the experience that bereaved families face, and sage advice from incredible experts in the field of perinatal loss. And if you're interested, there is also a meditation featured in last October's episodes, and it's a meditation designed for any parent or anyone grieving the loss of a child or a loved one. I am so incredibly honored and grateful for the opportunity to have this 2-part conversation with Gary Vogel, a grief expert with 30 years of experience in supporting bereaved families here in Central Florida. Gary Vogel is a licensed mental health counselor and has been in private practice since 1980 in the Central Florida area. His specialties include dealing with anxiety and depression, addictions, grief and loss, post-traumatic stress, and general life adjustment. As a clinical psychotherapist and through his own personal experience of losing his daughter Chelsea to stillbirth, Gary has helped thousands of parents struggling with the loss of a child. Gary has been facilitating the support group HEAL, Helping Endure Infant Loss, for couples who have experienced miscarriage, stillbirth, or infant loss since 1991. He has written 3 books on the subject of perinatal and neonatal loss. He has testified to House and Senate subcommittees concerning the legal issues surrounding these losses. He has appeared on national and local television and has traveled across the country speaking on the unique issues experienced by parents who have incurred the loss of a child. Gary is proud to be a member of the board of directors for the SIDS Alliance of Florida. Gary feels his greatest achievement is bringing the Angel of Hope to Central Florida, which hosts 2 ceremonies a year at the site, one on October 15th, a National Day of Remembrance for Pregnancy and Infant Loss, and December 6th, a day of remembrance at all Angel of Hope sites for parents who have lost a child. Welcome, Gary, to the Birth Ease podcast. I am so incredibly grateful and honored to have you here with me as I dedicate this month of October to pregnancy and infant loss awareness.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Can you share about the Angel of Hope?
The Angel of Hope, it's an interesting story, both locally and nationally, because the story really kind of illustrates how accidental and therefore organic the whole movement, it really is. On a national level, the Angel of Hope is a bronze statue of an angel that was featured in a book by Richard Paul Evans entitled The Christmas Box. In the book, an elderly woman who lives on a rather large estate, she's a widow and she lives there by herself. And so she employs a young family to come live with her to help her take care of the estate. And as the story progresses, the family notices that the elderly woman disappears from time to time. And when she reappears, she never explains where she's been. She never addresses it in any way. The story goes on, and she eventually dies. And upon her death, they discover the Christmas box. And as it turns out, the Christmas box is actually a memory box. It's a memory box filled with mementos of her little girl, the main character's little girl, who had died decades earlier as a child. And they also find that when she disappeared, she was exiting the estate through a garden gate and entering a cemetery that was behind the estate. And she was taking a flower and placing it at the foot of a statue of an angel. And that was the Angel of Hope.
Wow.
Rick, the author, originally self-published the book, but it did so well in sales that a major publisher picked it up. And they were asking him to do book signings across the country. And as he was doing that, people were coming forward and identifying themselves as grieving parents. And they identified with the main character because she was still actively mourning her child many, many years later. And grieving parents found that very validating. So they wanted to know where the statue was. Well, the book is fiction. The statue didn't exist. But enough people came forward and kept asking Rick that question. And so he eventually felt moved to commission one. And he was given the name, Rick lives in Salt Lake City, Utah. He was given the name of a world-renowned sculptor by the name of Ortho Fairbanks. And originally, as Rick tells the story, he didn't feel that he would be able to afford paying a commission, to such a world-renowned sculptor. But Rick met with Ortho's son. And as Rick explained to Ortho's son his idea, and he was looking for a bronze statue of an angel, his son realized that his parents had had a child die many years earlier, and that they would be enthusiastic about this idea. And so Ortho Fairbanks took the commission for next to nothing, produced this statue of an angel, which the model for the angel is actually one of the author's daughters.
Oh, wow.
He actually wrote the book, A Christmas Box, as a bedtime story for his children.
Oh.
He actually never meant to publish it. So once again, it was that accidental thing.
Right.
So anyway, the first Angel of Hope statue was dedicated in Salt Lake City on December the 6th, 1994. And December the 6th was chosen because that was the date in the book that the little girl died. Okay. And so people from all around the country attended that dedication. 1,500 people attended that dedication.
Wow.
And so almost immediately, many of those people wanted to know what they could do to bring the statue to their communities, because it offered them a way to be able to remember their children. And the movement just kind of spread organically. And it's still such today. This is a very unorganized thing. The lady who kind of quote unquote administrates the whole thing is a lady by the name of Lisa Johnson. And she is Rick's private secretary. So she's not an organizer or anything, but she's a sweet, sweet woman who takes everybody's information and gives them the information as to how to go about getting a statue. To switch to our local story, I started doing the Heal Group in 1991. And in 2006, a couple came through the group. Kristen and Anthony Bencomo came through the group as a result of their little girl, Gabriella Grace, dying in the NICU. And after group one night, Kristen came up to me and asked me where the local Angel of Hope statue was. And I admitted to her that I had never heard of the Angel of Hope at that point and what it's about. So she explained that it's a bronze statue of an angel and all the things I just said. It's about parents remembering their children. So I thought that it's something that deserved more attention. So I went home and researched it, got back with her the following week and said, yes, I'm fully on board with this idea. And yes, we need to form a committee and see what we can do to raise the funds, because you have to purchase the statue. It's about $15,000. And that's at cost.
Wow.
The foundry still produces them at cost.
Wow. That's amazing.
And so we formed a committee. We kind of delayed for a while. Kristen and Anthony got pregnant with their second child, and she spent some time in the NICU also. So they had to go through that process, and life intervened. We got together in the summer of 2009 and started really looking at what do we need to do to raise funds. So we basically just felt like none of us are fundraisers. None of us know what we're doing in the nonprofit sector. So we'll just tell our story and to people and ask for help and ask for money and see what happens. Well, the response we got from the community was just remarkable. People just started giving us money and writing checks. And before you know it, it didn't even take us a year. We had raised the $15,000.
Wow. That's wonderful.
And so we went ahead and purchased the statue. And as we're looking for a site, we approached the city of Altamont Springs, thinking that Crane's Roost Park would be a nice place for the statue.
Yeah.
Because it's a very popular park, and there's a lot of people there. And one spot in the park has bronze statues of children playing. And we thought that would be a nice spot. Well, the city manager turned us down flat. And he said, but I've got another idea. I've got another site I think you might want to take a look at. So we met with the city manager and a couple of city officials at a small half-acre neighborhood park called Sunshine Park. And when we were approaching the park, and it's a cute little park, it's right across the street from an elementary school. And I thought, okay, Sunshine Park, we're the Sunshine State, I get it, but we'll take a look at what's going on here. And so we enter the park. It sits on a corner. So there's winding sidewalk that goes through the park, and there's a courtyard. And this courtyard has benches that face the middle of the courtyard. And in the middle of the courtyard is a brick raised planter with basically nothing in it. Had a couple of flowers, but that was all. And Phil Penland, the city manager, said, what would you think about placing your statue there? And of course, it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect.
Right.
And then we started talking about the name of the park. Come to find out, it has nothing to do with the Sunshine State. The park is named after Ursula Sunshine Assad, who was a little girl who was killed by the hands of her mother's boyfriend. She was a victim of child abuse.
That's right.
Back in the mid-'80s, right there in Altamont Springs.
That's right.
And it just gave me chills when I realized who this park was named after. How perfect a place for the statue than in a park named for a little girl who died.
Yeah.
And so once again, you see what I mean? It just kind of all came together organically. It was a wonderful experience. And so we dedicated our statue on December the 6th, 2010. And we've been hosting ceremonies, candlelight ceremonies at our site ever since. We do 3 ceremonies a year. One in the spring is for SIDS parents, because I'm a member of the board of directors of the Florida SIDS Alliance. And so we started doing that ceremony a few years back.
Okay.
We do a second ceremony of the year on October the 15th, which was designated by Congress in 2006 to be a National Day of Remembrance for Pregnancy and Infant Loss. And the third ceremony we do every year is on December the 6th, which that ceremony is recreated at all the sites across the country of the Angel of Hope. Currently, there's about 160 Angel of Hope statues scattered across the country.
Wow.
There are 8 in the state of Florida.
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize we had that many.
Yeah, there are 8 right here in Florida.
Wow. Oh, that's beautiful.
On the base of our statue, it says, "For our children, loved, missed, and remembered." And that's what the Angel of Hope is all about. It's providing a place of comfort and solace for parents who've lost a child to remember their child. Because one of the things that we know is that when you lose a child, you don't lose that feeling of being a parent.
Right.
Okay. And the way that I put it, when you lose a child, you lose the opportunity to parent that child, but you don't lose the need to parent that child.
Mm.
And so the journey, to me, of losing a child has to do with figuring out how to parent a child who's no longer with me physically.
Yeah.
And that's what the Angel of Hope is all about. It's about remembering them, and using their name. In our ceremonies, we ask people to register in advance and give us their child's name. And we read all the children's names as a part of the ceremony. And there's something really wonderful about hearing your child's name said aloud and said to a group of people, for example, as a part of the ceremony. It's very validating.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
One of the things that I like to tell people as far as this journey of parenting a child who's not with you physically is that from a spiritual standpoint, I believe that we all have the same spiritual need. And that is to know that my being here mattered.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the case of a child, especially a younger child or with a pregnancy loss, full-term stillbirth, my situation, that child was not here long enough to be able to make their life matter. Okay? Literally, they were not here long enough to do that for themselves. But as their parents, we can do that for them.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that the essence of parenting? To do things for your children that they can't do for themselves. You see what I mean? To me, it's a perfect fit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so as a part of our ceremonies, we provide flowers, and we encourage the families to come forward as they hear their child's name and lay flowers at the foot of the statue of the angel.
Wow. It's a beautiful ceremony. I've attended it before.
Oh, you have. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so beautiful. And it's lovely to come together with so many people that understand.
Absolutely. One of the things that I usually try to incorporate into my comments is how wonderful it is to be amongst a group of people that when we hear our child's name, and that brings us joy and tears at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
that we're amongst people that we don't have to explain that to.
Exactly.
Because inherently, that group of people know.
Mm-hmm.
They just know what that's about.
Yeah. It creates this wonderful sense of safety and acceptance, and it lets you be more vulnerable.
Absolutely.
And there's such healing potential in that ability to be so raw and vulnerable with people that understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again, it's such a beautiful ceremony. It really is.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. So this year, how are you planning to do it? I saw today in the paper, we're recording this before it releases a couple weeks before, but I saw that they're opening everything up here in Florida. All businesses are open again.
Mm-hmm.
So are you going to be doing the ceremony virtually, or are you going to switch over to in person, do you think? Or you may not have had time to make that decision.
Well, yeah, because the opening of Florida, quote unquote, was just announced yesterday, as a matter of fact. So as a board, we have not had the opportunity yet to discuss that. But our plan, and I think in all honesty, we'll probably follow through with it. Our plan is to do the October 15th ceremony virtually.
Okay.
We've already involved in filming that.
Oh, okay.
So it will be, just as this podcast, it will be pre-recorded and put together. It's going to be recorded from several different locations because the people that are doing the readings are doing it from their homes. Anthony, that reads the names, is doing that recording from his home.
Mm.
But we did some recording at the site. A gentleman by the name of Louis Malera, who owns his own video production company and has volunteered his time, put it all together for us.
Wow.
We're going to broadcast it over Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter on October the 15th at 7 o'clock.
Oh, lovely. Oh, that's perfect because that's when you can also participate in the wave of light at 7 p.m. and light a candle.
Yes. And we've been participating in the Wave of Light since 2014.
Mm.
That comment will be woven into the presentation on the 15th, encouraging people at their homes to light a candle at 7 o'clock.
Yes, yes, to honor and remember.
Mm-hmm.
And it's lovely because the city of Orlando is going to light up various places in purple in honor of baby loss. And I heard from St. Cloud through a phone call. I have a message. They're going to do the same. So I'm so excited that these cities are coming together too.
Mm-hmm.
To honor our children and honor bereaved families. It's just so beautiful how everyone's coming together.
Mm-hmm.
It's making me teary thinking about it. I'm excited to go around and photograph it on the 15th. It's going to be nice.
And I think I had told you that one of the moms who's attended, she came through HEAL with her husband, and she's attended several of the Angel of Hope ceremonies. She arranges every year on October the 15th for the Orlando Eye to be in pink and blue.
Oh, perfect. I'm looking forward to that. And again, it's just so beautiful to see the city of Orlando and the city of St. Cloud supporting families. It's so meaningful. It really is, especially since this particular topic has been kind of brushed under. Like there's a lot of silence around baby loss. And it's nice that we're growing and evolving in our grief as a culture, even.
Yes. Yes. And I would agree with that 100%. When I started this journey and started doing the HEAL group back in 91, for example, none of these situations were taking place.
Mm-hmm.
Pregnancy and infant loss was still something that wasn't really talked about.
Right.
Matter of fact, there was a book written about that time that I thought had the perfect title, and it's called The Silent Sorrow, because people just weren't talking about it.
Right.
And I think you're exactly right, Michelle. I think as a culture, we've gotten much, much better at recognizing that this is something that does take place.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is that every year in the United States, approximately 1 million families will experience a pregnancy loss.
Wow.
That's a lot of people.
It is. It is. I hadn't heard the statistic put together that way. You hear 1 in 120 will experience a stillbirth, or you hear the statistics, but to think that 1 million families incur a loss,
Mm-hmm.
that's significant.
Where that statistic comes from is approximately 1 pregnancy in 4
Mm-hmm.
ends unsuccessfully.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if there are 3 million births, live births in the United States every year, that means that 1 million, you see where I'm getting that statistic from?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That automatically means that 1 million did not end successfully.
Yeah.
So that translates to 1 million families in the United States every year experience a pregnancy loss.
Wow.
And I think it's a wonderful thing that we are getting to the point, and I think that the word that you were searching for before, I think, is validation.
Mm-hmm.
When I do speaking engagements about grieving, I like to have fun with it, because it doesn't need to be just a sad and morose subject. And so one of the things that I always say is, if you as an audience get one thing out of my comments today, I want it to be that there are 3 essential things to remember about helping people grieve. And as I say that, and I kind of set it up, as I said that, everybody's getting their paper out and their pencils, got to write this down. This is critical, right? And then I say to them, validation, validation, validation.
Mm.
It's actually, it's kind of like real estate, location, location, location.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The essence of helping people grieve comes down to that.
Yeah.
Validating what they're experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah, because then you don't feel so alone.
Exactly. Well, and the essence of validation is that then you automatically feel that what you're experiencing is valid, is real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so our culture, recognizing that this is a valid grief, a valid loss, as a culture, we've come a long way in recognizing that these families have earned the right to grieve their child.
Mm-hmm.
And they've earned the right to remember their child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm not even sure where it changed because I know in the Victorian era, families truly did grieve and they would grieve their children and mourn, like really mourn publicly. And somewhere it shifted.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure where, maybe in the 50s when everything became scientific, but there was a shift for sure.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I'm not quite sure where it happened, but unfortunately, the culture in this country just didn't pick up some of the mourning rituals that other countries have developed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, unfortunately, in this country, there's the kind of no outward sign that a person is grieving as there is in other cultures.
Right.
My father was in the Air Force, and being a part of the military, we traveled all over the world. And I went to high school in Spain. And one of the things that I noticed in Spain was how many elderly women were black all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and how many men had black armbands sewn into their jackets. And in the Spanish culture at that time, and I say that because I don't know if that's continued, but I would suspect it has, that was an outward sign that they are mourning. Someone in their life has passed, and they're actively grieving the loss of that person.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, in this country, we've lost a lot of that. I sometimes think about this one too. You go back to Gone with the Wind,
Mm-hmm.
and Scarlett O'Hara in that Southern culture was expected to wear black for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an outward sign of her mourning. But somewhere in the evolution of our country and our culture, we've lost many of those traditions and those rituals that are all about mourning, that are all about the external outward expression of the fact that we have experienced a loss.
Yeah. And I do think everyone's journey is different. And so, maybe a requirement to wear black for a year might not feel appropriate to someone at the same time as someone that's been heavily grieving since last March. It would be nice because then, even if just people knew, oh, I have this black armband or I'm wearing black or something, then you could grant people a little more grace
Mhm.
if their thoughts are scattered or they're teary or they seem absent minded or just more irritable or withdrawn. It would be a way to grant people some grace in that grieving process, I think.
Well, it would give people something to identify quickly and easily that this
Mhm.
person is experiencing grief.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it would be nice if we had something like that, that people would automatically know, let's give this person some grace and let's give them some understanding and compassion.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, but even in that, I think until you walk through it, it's you have a deeper compassion once you've have, let me put it that way. When you've experienced a miscarriage, if you've lost a child, if you're grieving a parent or another loved one, it does change you.
Hmm. It's a transformative experience.
Mhm.
And especially if we embrace it and work our way through the process of incorporating that loss into our lives, which is what grief is. But yes, it transforms you. It really makes clear in one's life what's truly important and what's not.
Yes. Yes. I agree. So, I know from my experience in working with grieving families that they are truly my teachers. And so I'm wondering if you've had that same experience, and if so, what is one or two of the most significant things you feel that they've taught you?
Absolutely, yes. Having done the HEAL group now for almost 30 years, I could say without hesitation that I've learned something in almost every one of those groups. They've taught me something.
I can see that.
And as you ask that question, and I've learned over the years to just go with things as they occur to me, in my head, that example, for example, is coming up because it's meaningful. And so the first thing that comes up for me is the lesson of don't judge.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so let me tell you the story about this young Black couple that came into group one night, very first night of group. And as people are coming in, I'm kind of observing how they carry themselves, that kind of stuff. And so this young Black couple comes in, and she is very elegantly dressed and carried herself. Her demeanor was just, one of grace and elegance.
Mm.
And the guy that came in with her was the exact opposite of that. He came in looking like a street thug, and just with that cocky saunter and, the velvet jumpsuit, which tells you how long ago this was,
Mm-hmm.
and all the chains and the hat on sideways and the big sunglasses and and so they sit down, and she's sitting there kind of nice and proper and has, very good posture. And he's basically laying across the chair, slouching. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I don't want to deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to deal with this because, unfortunately, I was judging what I was seeing visually,
Mm-hmm.
and I was preparing myself for this guy not wanting to be here and just kind of making the process of the group more difficult. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I could not have been more wrong in my judgment. The young man's name was Michael. And they were not a couple. They were brother and sister. And Michael, throughout the course of the group, I'm turning up just even talking about him. I will never forget him. Michael, in the course of the group, talked so tenderly about his niece who died in his arms.
Oh my gosh.
And the fact that he was there to support his sister, as she went through this journey. And you see what I mean? And so
Mm-hmm.
very vividly in that experience, it taught me, don't judge.
Right. Yeah, to put our preconceived notions, our biases, all of that aside. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, I will never forget Michael as long as I live. And I love telling that story because it's all about, I think, what we do as humans. We have preconceptions and we judge people.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we need to understand that you could be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Your judgment could be way off. And in that case, my judgment couldn't have been more off.
Wow. That's profound because I know from working with couples, sometimes we get that, what do I want to, like, conditioning, past painful learning, or just experiences, right? And sometimes when you work with couples, I have partners that you can tell from their body posture, from the things they say, they don't want to be there. They don't want to be there. And
that they were forced to be there.
right. Or they feel obligated to go. And giving them that space to just be how they need to be can help to soften that, to mitigate that. And sometimes they're still miserable the whole time, but other times as they relax into it, then they let their guard down.
Exactly.
And I would think in this case and group, everybody's guard has to be up because it is just so raw.
Absolutely. And one of I think it's kind of an interesting thing about the format that I use is by doing the group basically every 3 months, that the people that make up the group, their loss has taken place usually within the past 6 months.
Yeah.
At the very most.
Yeah.
And so the nice thing about the group, as I do it, is that all those couples, therefore, are in pretty much the same place in their journey of grieving. And there's bonding in that.
Mm-hmm.
There's recognition in that. And one of the things we do the very first night is give everybody the opportunity to tell their story. And as those stories unfold, all the group members are hearing that this couple's loss took place sometimes on the exact same day that theirs did, and it's interesting that that happens fairly often.
Yeah.
Because again, all those losses usually happen within the last 3 months. It's concluded the previous heal group is what it comes down to.
Yeah. Yeah. Remembering the one that I attended, my loss had been years and years ago because I went to support my friend.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone else was in there. I think she had lost her baby 2 years prior, but she was finally ready to really grieve. And that was kind of nice too, to see how people are moving through it and that it isn't always going to be so overwhelming. And then at the same time, even though it's been years, that pain can still be there of that loss. If that makes sense, what I'm saying.
Oh, it makes perfect sense, because I believe that the pain of our loss never really goes away.
Mm-hmm.
I think we learn how to carry it.
Yeah.
I think the pain goes from an acute stabbing pain to more of a chronic dull pain.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that's important to realize about grieving is that loss puts us in touch with loss.
Mm-hmm.
And so we go through the journey of our life and we experience more losses. We're going to get in touch with previous losses.
Mm-hmm.
It's a part of that process.
Yeah. Yeah, and that makes lots of sense to me as well, because this month would have been a friend of mine, her and her husband's anniversary, and he passed away almost 3 years ago. He had a heart attack and was gone within an hour. And then it also was the 20th anniversary of my best friend passing, and the end of September is the first year anniversary of my stepmom passing. And all the grief, it just, I think, kind of became amplified, especially with the pandemic and my little girl's dad. We haven't seen him in almost a year. And the grief of losing my friend was there. It was softer, but I'm trying to find the words. It just, the fact that it had been 20 years and everything that happened around it, it all just got amplified. And I was grateful that I knew to just sit with it and honor it.
Mm-hmm. Good for you.
Yeah. And just give myself grace. And I don't think culturally we're always told that, or we don't always understand that there's layers and that, oh, I'm feeling this so intensely because this memory got triggered and that grief got triggered and this grief got triggered, and it's all within the matter of this month, and our bodies remember as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think often we're not nearly as gentle with ourselves as we need to be.
Yes, I agree.
And I think often, and I think you make a good point, as we're experiencing a certain date, for example. And I have this belief that as we move through life, we pick up dates.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
When you're a young child, there are only 2 dates, and this is true for Christian families, but there are only 2 dates that are important: your birthday and Christmas.
Yeah, and maybe Halloween. Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
Halloween. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
I'll give you that one. But there's only those 2 dates that are important. And then as we grow, if we have siblings, we realize, oh, okay, they have a birthday too. And then, oh, mom and dad, they have a birthday. And then they have this thing called an anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
And then we start to socialize and we pick up friends and then they have birthdays. And then we meet the right person and we marry. And now we have an anniversary. And then we have our children's. And then we have the dates that people have passed.
Mm-hmm.
And before you know it, we get to a certain point in our lives where the calendar is almost full.
Yeah.
Of significant dates in our lives, that we have to keep track of. And I think that going back to what you just said, when one of these dates occurs, and suddenly we become aware of not just the date, but its significance to us,
Mm-hmm.
then suddenly these emotions are arising. And I think unfortunately, and I think very much in this country, in this culture, we tell ourselves, I shouldn't be feeling this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've always felt that the word should is the most powerful and significant word in the English language.
Mm.
It's the most destructive word in the English language.
Yeah.
Because it's all about guilt.
Yeah. Yeah.
The word should, its only purpose is guilt. And so in this context, I'm telling myself through guilt that I shouldn't be feeling what I'm feeling.
Right.
But the reality is I'm feeling what I'm feeling for a reason.
Yeah.
And rather than make yourself guilty for what you're feeling, I think we'd be much better off acknowledge what you're feeling and then move forward from there.
Yeah. And how that guilt can turn into shame, because even as we're talking, I'm thinking about, I was in Target the other day and I ran into one of my beloved families and she asked me how I've been doing because her daughter's 3 now. And I had been in the Target and kind of away from my kids, just letting myself kind of be sad in Target, right? Because I didn't want to burden the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And the night before, my father had cried in my arms. And so I was just being sad. And she was very gracious and loving about it. And we talked about her new baby she's expecting and her plans for her birth. And then I'm going through the Target. And then I'm feeling this shame come up like, oh, I shouldn't have been crying in Target. And she saw me cry. And I burdened her with my grief and just all these thoughts going through my head. It's that cultural thing. And again, thank goodness knowing to step back with it.
Mm-hmm.
But as we're talking, like I feel this tears coming up that we're not supposed to burden people with our grief, or grief is something to feel embarrassed or ashamed of. Like, this is big. I'm feeling it all through my body.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, all of those things are learned.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to recognize that aspect of it, that we've learned to be ashamed. We've learned to be embarrassed. We've been taught that to share our emotion with another person, to share our grief with another person, we've been taught that that burdens them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that we need to be able to give that person that we're sharing it with, we need to be able to give them the opportunity to be there with us in that moment and allow them to make the choice to be there with us.
Right.
And by thinking of it as a burden, I don't think we're recognizing they're making a choice.
Yeah.
Because that person that you ran into in Target, for example, could have said, oh, hold it, I gotta go.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, she was very gracious in it. And some people can't do that. They will, like, oh, change the subject, they'll go.
Exactly. And I recognize, and I think we all need to understand that people have capacities,
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they just don't have the capacity to be with us in that moment,
Right.
at that time. Okay, I understand that. But if someone makes the choice to be with me in that moment, I want to honor that.
Yeah. That's a really beautiful way to look at it. Yeah. In a healthier way, for sure. So, thank you so much for this time, for your wisdom. I truly am so grateful.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I truly am. And for all the work and space holding and compassion that you've given families these 30 years. It's just incredible. It truly is.
Well, and they have given me so much. I think I mentioned when we first started this conversation that as a psychotherapist, I never set out to do grieving work. That was not my strong point. But I've learned so much from all of the people that I've sat with over the years. They taught me so much. And I've looked always at that when I have an opportunity to share with others what I've been taught, what I've learned over the years, that's my way of honoring them who taught me.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I love to do conversations like this, and I love to share what I've learned because that honors all those couples that I've sat with over the years and what they've taught me.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if you had one last pearl of wisdom that you'd like to share with the listeners, what would that be?
Validation. Whether we're talking to people who are within the circle of someone who is grieving, and therefore in saying to them, listen to what the grieving person needs, validate their experiences. Whatever it is that they're experiencing, let them know that it's real and that it's okay to experience that. Okay? And the same holds true for those listeners out there that might be grieving themselves, because we do have the ability to self-validate. Okay? And that takes away that should word.
Yeah.
Because there's the destructive power of that should word, because what we're doing is invalidating what we're experiencing. Okay. And so I think it's very important to recognize that I need to validate within myself what I'm experiencing, whatever that might be.
Yeah. Yeah, to give it space and honor it, because then it can move through you. You can walk with it. But when we shove it down, then it just comes back up in a bigger way often.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I like to say about denial, which is a form of shoving it down, as you just put it, is that denial is not a coping mechanism.
Mm.
Denial is actually a way of distorting reality.
Mm.
And so in our denial that, no, I'm not experiencing this, all we're doing is kind of changing our viewpoint, changing our reality in that moment. But whatever it is that we're trying so hard to get rid of, that thing that we're trying to deny, it's still there. And it will remain there until we process it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then it often cries out louder to be heard.
And again, because loss is cumulative.
Mm-hmm.
And if we continue to deny it, to deny how we are emotionally reacting to our loss, and additional losses throughout our life starts taking place, it just accumulates and gains more and more power until eventually it comes forward on its own, involuntarily.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's how I realized too, oh, I need to take some time to honor my grief, because I found myself just crying uncontrollably
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't stop it. And I'm like, okay, I need to step back. I need to honor this. What's going on within me? And that's where I'm like, oh, yeah, this and this and this and this. And I've been holding space for everyone in the family. I need to find someone to hold space for me and allow myself to grieve.
And allow them to be in that space with you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you again, Gary. This has just been such a beautiful conversation, and I appreciate your wisdom so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And for the families listening, there will be links in the show notes to the Heal group and to the Angel of Hope. And you can also find resources for grief and to find support on my website as well. And so in this, remember to hold yourself with grace and compassion, and know that there are people out there that can sit in that grief with you and help you to honor it and remember those that you love. So thank you again.
For more great conversations like these, or to find out more information and access Michelle's library of amazing guests, go to birtheaseservices.com/podcast. For more information on the Birth Ease method, Michelle's classes, meditations, and other services, go to birtheaseservices.com.